Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Ask Away. Hi to everybody in the live chat who is joining us for the live stream. As always, if you have questions for me in the live chat, please just hang on to them for a little while, and I'll get to questions from people in the live chat after I answer some questions from patrons. But Radical Bacon, did you just ask another Patreon question? You did. Oh, that's okay. Um, I'm gonna do you a solid. And I'm gonna put that in. But that was really good. That was really good. I applaud you for that. But okay, so that actually there, Radical Bacon's extra question has been added to the script. But on that subject, that's actually something I want to talk about really quick before I get into answering the questions. And that is, first of all, starting with this episode of Ask Away, I am imposing on myself a hard 90-minute time limit for the live stream. Last time we went over 2 hours, and it was a ton of fun. Like, honestly, if I just gave myself permission and there were enough of you all in the live chat, I would do this all night. Like this, I can't tell you how much fun this is. But I don't want it to go on too long. For the sake of anybody watching, for the sake of me and other things I might have to do this evening. So starting with this episode, I'm going to impose a hard 90-minute time limit. So I'll answer all the patron questions, and then I'll hang out with everybody in the live chat and answer as many questions from the live chat as I can up until we reach the 90-minute time limit. And then I'll say, all right, that's it. Got to go. And I'll wrap it up, and that'll be it. So that's the first change. The second change is not for this episode, but starting on the next Ask Away episode. So in 2 weeks on the next episode, I am also going to start only answering one question per patron per show. And that is also to do with just trying to manage the time limit and not having to, rush through so many questions in one show. It's not that I mind the questions, because the questions are amazing. And the fact that there are even so many people who are asking questions is like awesome, but just so that it's a smoother show, and so that it's not quite as crammed full, and it doesn't threaten to drag on all that long. So starting with next week's, or 2 weeks from now, the next episode, if Radical Bacon wants to pull that trick again and have that question answered on the show, that question will have to be the only question that is submitted by Radical Bacon. And I'm gonna put a note about this in the call for questions next time, just so it's in writing and everybody can look at it. But the deal is, if you are a Patreon patron, and you forget or you flagrantly disregard this new rule, I will just answer the first question that you ask, and then the other questions that you ask, if you ask more than one question for that post, you can just ask them again for a future episode. I don't mind that. But starting next time, I'll only be able to answer one question per Patreon patron per show. And for the live chat, if you're a patron or not, if you're in the live chat, you can ask as many questions as you want when I get to the live chat, and I'll just deal with the live chat for as much time as I have left. Okay, but starting next time, only one question per patron for the Patreon question portion. Okay, so having dispensed with that, let's answer some questions, since that's theoretically what we're all here to do. So let's turn to the questions that my very fine Patreon patrons have submitted this time around, and we'll see what we've got here. The first question is from Tom McDonald, who I saw earlier in the live chat. Hi, Tom. Thanks for being here. Tom says, Steve, I don't remember if anyone has asked this, but I was wondering whether you were involved in school clubs or sports, or if you were ever in a group like Scouts or an organized church activity group. I was a scout from when I was 7 in Cub Scouts all the way through high school, finally earning my Eagle rank and Order of the Arrow. That was pretty formative for me. In high school, I was in debate, forensics, plays, and even the ski and shot put team. Anything like that for you? Fairly simple answer for this one. No. I was never in any clubs. I never played organized sports. After school, I would either go home and just hang out and do my homework and watch TV, or I would hang out with friends. And sometimes me and my friends would play like pickup baseball games or something like that. But I never played organized sports, and I was never a member of a club. So no, I never really did any of that. My dad did. My grandfather did. My dad's dad, he did. I think my mom might have too. I think she might have. I don't know if she was a Girl Scout. She might have been. But I know, she was, involved in stuff like that when she was a kid. But no, I never did that. My brother, my younger brother, he wasn't a scout, but he played sports. He was on the baseball team, or at least he played Little League. I don't think he ever played for our school team, but he played Little League and was involved in various other things. So he was much more civic minded and much more social and, involved in organizations and stuff. But I never was. So no, I don't have any scout stories, sadly, to tell. I never really got involved in that. Next is from David Colby. Questions. What is up with all those weirdos on Twitter who seem to wait for every tweet you make? It's like you tweet something, then there'll be a few nice tweet Steve tweets, then one person going, I hope you get flayed alive, asshole. Do they really have nothing better to do with their lives? No, they don't. That's just sad. Number two, if you could have any superpower, what would it be? And why isn't it Dr. Manhattan's atomic manipulation abilities? Seriously, how rock stupid was the Nixon administration? They have a literal god on their side, and the most they can think of to do with him is a nuclear deterrent? Well, and a cheap source of lithium, I suppose. Three, I am still getting into Twitter fights about The Last Jedi. Ironically, people constantly shitting on the best Star Wars movie ever made, I Have a Knife, I Will Fight Anyone Who Disagrees with Me, has only made me go back and rewatch it even more critically, which has led me to notice subtle, awesome details I hadn't noticed before. Has this ever happened with you? Like, has the Star Trek disco hate crowd led you, ironically, to a deeper appreciation of disco's qualities? 4, speaking of disco, I am not super impressed with it. Not because it breaks canon or because it's grim or dumb or anything, though I find the Spore Drive a bit of a weird thing to hang your entire series on, but rather because I'm so goddamn sick of Star Trek being stuck in the past. A few months ago, I reinstalled the video game Star Trek Bridge Commander. It came out in 2002, meaning it's almost old enough to vote. And it is set in the immediate aftermath of the Dominion War. Playing it, I was struck by how this 17-year-old game is set further in the future than Enterprise, Disco, the entire Kelvin timeline, almost 20 years of Star Trek. When are we actually going to go forward with this dig-dang-dong series? 5, last question. Do you ever think that the various godlike entities in Star Trek get in each other's ways? Like, do the Organians and the Q butt heads? Did Q ever fight the Greek pantheon? Was Gary Mitchell the only human to ever cross the galactic barrier and get godlike powers? There could be an entire show built around the gods of Star Trek, if you really wanted an out-there premise. Okay, now let's go back and answer all those questions one at a time. All great questions, but also I think a good example of why I want to try to narrow it down and have people just answer or just ask one question per show from now on. But okay, these are all great questions. So the Twitter people, I think you've got it yourself there, David. Yeah, it's people who have nothing better to do, or people who are like wildly overestimating my own interest or investment in what they're doing. Like Twitter trolling like that. At this point, I've experienced it so much that it's just kind of a minor annoyance. Like, it takes one click of a mouse for me to block someone manually, if they haven't been blocked by a list or by me running a chain block of someone's followers. It takes less than a second. Click and they're gone. And then I never think of them again. So it's nothing more than a minor annoyance to me. But the fact that so many of them seem so invested in it and follow me or pay attention to my tweets for the sole purpose of jumping in and making some inane comment or making some futile attempt to insult me or hurt my feelings, it says much more about them and their lives than it does me. So yeah, you're on the right track there. As far as Dr. Manhattan's superpowers, yeah, I guess they did kind of. He does have godlike abilities, and it does seem like he could have been put to greater use in Watchmen by the Nixon administration. But aren't we kind of glad that Nixon didn't try to convince him to use his more godlike powers? Would you really want the world remade in the image of the vision of Richard Nixon? I sure wouldn't. As for what superpower would I want to have, I'm very old-fashioned and very boring, and I would love to be able to fly. Have I come to appreciate a movie more because of people shitting on it? I will say that the second time I watched The Last Jedi, I did like it even more than the first time. I think I've only actually watched it straight through twice. And the second time that I watched it, I did like it even better than the first time. And of course, as always happens with the second time you watch a movie, I noticed things in it that I didn't notice before. I caught things that sort of, flew past me the first time. And it certainly didn't suffer from a second viewing. It was a lot better the second time. I had a greater appreciation for it, but it wasn't necessarily because of the people who hated on it. It was just because I watched it again and it held up, and I saw things about it that I missed the first time that I also liked. And that hasn't happened with Discovery either, for the simple reason that I haven't gone back and watched any of Discovery for a second time. I watched the first season all the way through as it was released, and I haven't gone back and watched it again. And same thing with this second season so far. I've been watching the episodes every week as they come out, and I haven't gone back and rewatched any. So I can't say. Maybe, if I were to do that again, I would notice things I didn't notice before. Maybe some things that I think are problems now would bother me less if I watched it again. I don't know, but I can't say because I haven't done it. And I take your point about Star Trek needing to move forward. I like Discovery as much as I've talked about. Just this past week, I did a video about reviewing the first half of the second season, where I talked about, in addition to all the things I really like about it, I also talked about the problems I have with it, mostly the pacing of individual episodes, which I think is a big problem for certain episodes. But yeah, in general, even though the fact that it's a prequel doesn't really bother me and doesn't keep me from enjoying it, I also kind of wish that they would start moving forward again. And I think they're going to, at least with the Picard series. The Discovery will presumably continue in its current time period. The Philippa Georgiou spinoff will be in the same time period, I would assume. But the Picard show is going to be set ahead. Is going to be set post Nemesis, post Star Trek '09, actually, because it will apparently incorporate the destruction of Romulus, which took place in the Prime timeline in Star Trek '09. That was the event that Prime Spock was trying to prevent, which ended up throwing him and Nero back in time and creating the Kelvin timeline. So the Picard show will take place post that event. So I'm looking forward to that, and I do think it's a good idea to start moving things forward. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be that's not the way I would go with a Star Trek series, to have, the gods of Star Trek fighting each other. It's just not something I'm particularly interested in. It's a neat idea, and it's like a neat thing to sort of think about as a fan question. But for an entire show, I don't think I would really, I would check it out if somebody made it, and it might be good, it might not be, but wouldn't be my idea. I kind of like the idea that we were talking about, I think last Ask Away live stream, about doing shows of different genres, but set in the Star Trek universe, like do a Star Trek medical show or a Star Trek cop show or something like that. But yeah, you're right. There are lots of godlike beings in Star Trek. It's weird that if you think about it, they're way, way, way more godlike beings than you realize. And there are way, way more either identical copies of planet Earth or planets that don't look like Earth, but have very similar, evolutionary developments to Earth, to the point where the intelligent species that lives there just look just like humans. That's kind of weird that there are so many aliens that basically look exactly like us. A lot of them don't even have funny ears or spots. They just look just like humans. And when you think about it, it's like, wow, that's interesting. Yeah. Okay. The next patron question is from Michael Bryan, who says, "Dear Mr. Shives, I'm keenly aware of your adoration for Superman Returns. My question is, what are your thoughts on the score produced by John Ottman? And furthermore, do you happen to own the extended La La Land release of the score? If you don't, I highly recommend it, as the original CD left a great deal to be desired." That's interesting that you would say that. I have the original release. And I thought it was all right. I'm not sure what you mean by had a lot to be desired, but I haven't heard the La La Land extended release. I know that I didn't even know that there was one for Superman Returns. I knew that there was was it an extended release, or was it just a remaster of the soundtrack for Superman the Motion Picture, Superman the movie? the original John Williams score. I know that La La Land released that, but I didn't know they released an extended Superman Returns score. I'll have to look for that and check that out because, yeah, I love the score to Superman Returns. I think it's beautiful. I think it doesn't get as much credit as it deserves because it incorporates those original John Williams themes and uses them so prominently and so unapologetically. But Ottman's original stuff there is just gorgeous. It's so good. It's really big and exciting and heroic when it needs to be, and it's so tender and sad and heartbreaking and just beautiful when it needs to be that as well. It's just an outstanding score. I really, really like it, and it doesn't get nearly the appreciation that it deserves. Next, from Nick Anderson. It's pretty wearying these days being a lefty. I've long been confounded by the purported virtues of incrementalism, of gradualism, of settling for the smallest morsel of progress, seeing prospects like a Green New Deal or Medicare for All set aside and potentially pushed back to 10, 20, 30 years from now because all it takes is one dunderhead like Trump or his cronies to take back what little ground we gained seemingly overnight. Progress is slow, and it's undone so quickly. One step forward, two steps back, or three, or four. Then you have people advocating for radical change dismissed as lefter than thou, bloviating children. Just wondering what your take on all of this is. Is it realistic to expect the Democratic Party to become more aggressive and create more lasting changes and outpace the right? Or is this exhausting game of tug of war going to continue at its current pace in perpetuity because that's just the nature of things? I would caution against saying, well, that's just the nature of things, because that's exactly the sort of attitude that leads to change always being incremental and always being easily undone. There have been moments in American history where radical, at least relatively radical, not radical in the sense of tearing down the system and, putting up something new, not revolutionary, but significant change has happened in a very short time, right? The first few years post-Civil War, where slavery was abolished, where the constitutional amendments abolishing slavery and guaranteeing the rights of former slaves, those are just radical changes that could not have been imagined a few years before, and they happened. During the early years of the Great Depression, when Franklin Roosevelt pushed through the New Deal legislation, those were incredible, far-reaching, sweeping changes that happened more or less all at once. They were not incremental. They happened within a few years. It was all done. And a lot of that still remains in place today and is considered foundational to a lot of our modern United States. Lyndon Johnson and the Great Society, again, similar situation. The Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, the Equal Employment Act, major pieces of transformative legislation, far-reaching, passed relatively quickly, not incremental change, big change that happened all at once because there were enough people supporting it and there was enough audacity and enough courage to say, this is important, this is needed, we have to do this, let's do this now. So as much as there are examples throughout American history of the opposite of that, of incremental change, and as much as we have had mostly that for the last several decades, really, especially when it comes to progress, when it comes to leftist proposals and progressive proposals, there's been a lot of incremental change that can easily be rewound when a conservative takes back over. There are examples in our history of major steps forward. And I think we need to look to those examples to remind ourselves that it's possible. I don't think that we're stuck with it. I think that the Democratic Party can be made to be more forward-looking, to be bolder, to be more aggressively progressive. I think that is possible because it's happened before. And it can happen again if enough people make it happen. If the Democratic Party becomes controlled by progressives who say, you know what, we're tired of waiting. We want Medicare for all. We want the Green New Deal. We want something like a universal basic income. We want to do something to really enshrine in law measures to protect LGBTQ equality, to address the wage gap, to address police brutality and criminal justice inequalities. We can make those things happen. And we don't have to just gradually step it up. We can make those things happen if we have the will and if we have the numbers. It's possible. We just have to make it happen. So yeah, I don't think we're stuck with it. I just think we have to plant our feet and we have to fight for it and we have to do it. And if we get in situations where we push for major changes, and the best we can do right now is a relatively minor change, I do think we should take that instead of taking nothing. If you get 75% of what you want, you should take the 75% instead of just taking zero because you would rather have nothing than have 100%. I don't think that makes sense. But push for the 100%. And if you get the 75, take the 75 and then immediately start pushing for the other 25. But swing for the fences, go for it. Because it's happened before. And it can happen again. And I hope that it does. And I wish that there were more people who were willing to do that. Next question from Dr. Babylon. Steve, what the fuck was up with that pair of Kansas bills that tried to define the LGBT community as a denominational sect of the religion of secular humanism? Fortunately, neither of those bills nor the Tennessee Natural Marriage Defense Act, which was introduced the very same day, are going to become law. How self-aware do you think the legislators were? Do these bills come from a place of cynicism or delusion or both? To me, this bizarre gambit reeks of desperation. Yeah, I think if I had to guess, I don't know exactly what is in the heads and the hearts of the people writing those bills, but if I had to guess, I would say that it's more cynicism than sincerity. I think the people who wrote those bills don't honestly believe that being gay or being trans is an identity that is associated with a religion called secular humanism. But I think they thought that would play well to their base. And I think they thought maybe they could make it stick if they got it in front of the right judge, or if they phrased it in the right way to get it in front of enough people in the legislature who would vote for it. I feel like that was the play there. Let's see. Okay, we know this is bullshit, but we really want to oppress gay people. We really want to oppress trans people. We really want to get rid of same-sex marriage. So let's try this and see if we can make this stick. That's what I think that was. I don't think most of the people who were like super in favor of it sincerely believed that having an LGBTQ identity means you are part of a denomination of a secular religion. But I think they were going for it. They thought they were clever. They thought they had found a loophole and they were trying to make it stick. That's what I think. Next question from Justin Luger. Steve, new patron here. Very much enjoy all the Trek-related content. Great job on that, and looking forward to your Disco mid-season recap. As we just crossed the halfway mark of the season, any idea when we'll be seeing that video? Take care. Justin, what a coincidence that I have a new patron named Justin Luger on the same week when the legendary Japanese pro wrestler Jushin Liger announces his retirement. Can that possibly be a coincidence? Yes, it can. It's definitely what it is, but I just thought it was cool because that's just the way my brain works. Yeah, the Discovery Season 2 so far review video is up. It went up on Wednesday, so if you haven't watched it yet, you can go watch it after this. Or you can watch it right now if you don't feel like watching this anymore. Yeah, and just very quickly, I thought season 2 of Discovery has been really, really, really good so far. I think there have been some pacing problems. I think there have been a couple episodes where there's just way too much going on, and it goes by too fast, and it's just way too crammed full of stuff for one episode. But overall, I think it's really good, and I love Captain Pike. I still love Tilly. I still love Saru. And I'm interested in where the larger story arc is going. I think it's a good idea that this season is built around a mystery instead of a war. I think that's a very good call, a really good adjustment. And generally, I think it's been really good. And I can't wait for the rest of the season. And this week's episode was really, really cool. I'm still kind of processing it. I don't know if it was a good episode or if I just was overwhelmed and won over by the Easter eggs to a Star Trek nerd like me. There were so many like really obvious things and really subtle things in that show that just call out to me as a Star Trek fan. And I was just completely won over by it. I thought it was so much fun. So yeah, the second half of season 2 is off to a very good start. Next question from Joe McClory. Congrats on the VidCon grant, and the reaction to it made me remember a question I've had since you went from you had to ask away. Have you refused anyone from donating to your Patreon because you had moral opposition to taking their money, or did not want to be forced to answer their disingenuous questions? Or have you not even had to decide what question or person asking a question was too toxic to engage with, because any asshole that feigns outrage at your unwillingness to engage with them isn't willing to put down a single dollar or be civil in the chat and ask the questions in a civil manner to be part of your bi-weekly community engagement? It hasn't happened. I think it's only happened once, maybe twice. I think maybe there are 2 times where I refunded a pledge and blocked a patron. The first time was because it was an obvious, well-known troll, someone who made attack videos about me constantly, and it was well known as just being a disingenuous, abusive, bigoted piece of shit. And he made a $20 per month donation, joined as a $20 per month patron, and requested a Stephen Stuffy video as the reward, which is an optional reward that anybody who pledges $20 a month can request. I'll make you a custom Stephen Stuffy video. And I knew who it was, and I knew what he was doing, so I immediately refunded his pledge and blocked him. And that was it. Because I don't want his money. First, I wouldn't take money from him. And second, I don't want someone like that as a part of my patron community. That's just not going to work. And the second one was someone who I didn't know, but became a patron at, I'm not sure what level. It might have been $1 a month, or maybe $5. I can't remember. But and they immediately started leaving all of these really, really spammy, like trolly comments on posts on my Patreon feed. And that gave me, and I didn't know this person, and it gave me like a really, really bad vibe. I thought like this, I don't think I really want this person around if that's how they're going to behave, if they're going to just, inundate the comment sections with just really, really irrelevant, spammy stuff. So I did that. So I refunded their pledge and blocked them as well. But it hasn't been a problem. I mean, obviously I'm willing to do it. If someone that I either know is a piece of shit or turns out to be a piece of shit is a patron of mine, I'm more than happy to refund their pledge and block them. I've done it before, and I'm willing to do it. But fortunately, it hasn't really been an issue. Next question from Josa. Number 1, do you think Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is genuine? From what is presented of her, she seems like the type of politician you'd want. Down to earth, a normal person, and is much more likely to drain the swamp in the long run than Trump would. Or is it all an act? Or will she be corrupted by Washington? 2, will the Republican Party follow the Democrats to the left, becoming more centrist like the Democrats have followed the Republicans to the right? Or will we just have a very polarized system where, depending on the voters' mood, we will have the extreme right or left? Well, to answer the first one, I do think Ocasio-Cortez is genuine. Time may prove me wrong. It may turn out that she's not, or as you suggest, unfortunately, she may wind up being corrupted by Washington if she's there for a very long time. I don't know. I hope not, but time will tell. It's happened before. But I do think she's genuine. No, I don't think it's an act. I don't think she's putting on. And as I mentioned when Kevin Logan and I talked about her a little bit when I was on Kevin's channel a couple of days ago, which was really fun and a great show. And if you haven't watched it, go check out my stream that I did on Kevin Logan's channel on Wednesday, because it was really, really cool. And as I said then, I've been really impressed with her. And the most impressive thing about her is watching her actually do her job, watching her in committee hearings, asking questions, like when she was questioning Michael Cohen during the Cohen hearing before the Oversight Committee. I thought she was the most impressive person there. I thought she asked the most useful and interesting questions. I thought it looked like she was building a basis for continuing the investigation and for verifying Cohen's testimony. And I just thought it was fantastic. So yeah, I think very highly of her. And I hope that the things you suggest might happen at some point to her don't happen. And she's in Congress for a long time, and she remains who she is currently. And as for the Republicans moving to the left, I wouldn't bet on that. At least not anytime soon. I mean, look, realignment has happened before, but I would not be waiting for it to happen anytime soon. I think within my lifetime, the Republican Party will probably not move significantly toward the center or toward the left. I think they'll probably stay on the right. I don't think that is a party that will make that particular course correction, no matter how bad it gets for them. I think they will they will drive themselves over a cliff politically before they start to make serious moves toward the center or toward the left as a party. Next question from General Contact Unit Problem Child. A disaster has destroyed the world. You're on a spaceship going to another world to start up a new human society. You're the only full-grown adult on the ship, so when you get there, it'll be totally up to you to decide how this new society will be run. What sort of economic system would you want this new society to have? What sort of government would you want this new society to have? Particularly, do you prefer direct democracy or representative democracy? Well, that last one is actually a lot easier. I would want, if it was a small group, then direct democracy. If it was a large group, then representational democracy. To me, that's a fairly easy choice. I don't think direct democracy is a good idea if you have a very large population. I think once you get up to the size of like a small to medium-sized town, at least, you need to start going to some kind of representational system. You need to start having a town council or something like that to actually pass statutes and enforce laws. I just don't think direct democracy works if there are that many people involved with it. But as for the economic system, I don't know. I'm not sure what I would say. I mean, if you're starting fresh, of course, yeah, it would be tempted to start to say, can we try something other than just a straight capitalistic system? Because we've tried that already. And it certainly leads to it leads to certain problems. So it would be tempting to try something else. And I would hope that there would be more learned people on the ship to start the society with than I, who could advise me on that or could contribute to that. Because honestly, I am not the person to ask that question to, because I took one economics course in college and it was macroeconomics, and I remember almost nothing about it. And I, unlike many other people who are to the left in politics, I have not really read up on leftist economics. I've not read Marx. I don't know, I haven't read the literature, and I'm not comfortable enough speaking with authority saying, yes, we should definitely use this economic model, because I don't know. So I don't know. But as for a system of government, yeah, if it's a small enough colony at first, I would say direct democracy. Once it starts to get bigger and you have a few thousand people living there, then I prefer representational democracy. I just think it works better. Next question is from Radical Bacon. This would be the question that was not submitted at the very last second. What would you see if you looked into the mirror of Erised right now? The mirror of Erised would be the mirror in Harry Potter, where you look into it and your reflection is the thing that you want the most. That's a deceptively tough question. What would I see if I looked in the mirror of Erised right now? I mean, right at this moment, it would be me holding a cup of coffee, because even though it's 6:30 p.m. where I am, and I drank like a whole pot of coffee this morning, the last couple of days, for some reasons, maybe because it's been cold, I don't know, but I've just been craving coffee like all day, and not just for a pick me up, just like for the taste, just for the experience of drinking it. I don't know. Maybe it would be a cup of coffee. Is that too mundane? Were you hoping for like a more probing, revelatory answer? That's all I've got. I would really, God, I would just love a cup of fucking coffee. I think after this is over, I'm going to make some coffee. I don't care if it keeps me up. I've got work to do later anyway. I should be alert. I should be ready. I'm going to make some coffee. Next question from John Burnsy. Hi, Steve. 2 questions. Did you see the wacky election outcome in North Carolina? Wow. Hey. 2, after the last 2 episodes of the Orville, I'm curious if this issue will be raised with the Union. After the Kalons tried to destroy all of the biologicals like they did on their own planet, starting with Earth, there are now 3 kinds of Kalons. Those who participated in the genocide, those like Isaac who were not created until after, and those who were just following orders. After tossing off the shackles of slavery, after all, tossing off the shackles of slavery is one thing, but then when does the line get crossed into full-scale genocide? As non-biologicals, they are still like the question of, is Data another species? Is there a question of, I was just following orders as a defense? This is because on the other side of the xenophobic scale, we have the Krill, who think everyone else is a lower race. They were desperate and needed the Krill's help, but if they can somehow help the Krill to change their viewpoint, don't they need to make Isaac and the other Kalons understand that there is a line between defending oneself and committing genocide, and following orders is not an acceptable defense, right? I'm uncertain if my logic is without flaws, but I am curious about your take on this, and yes, we can all blame this on Brent Spiner. Well, yeah, I think, it's probably fun to blame lots of stuff on Brent Spiner, because I feel like his reaction would always at least be funny, if he found out that you were saying it was his fault. Yeah, I saw the North Carolina thing. I think it's good that they're having a new election. I was glad to see that. That the whole thing is a clusterfuck, and I'm glad that they're holding a new election. And also, the guy who stole the election the first time is apparently not going to run in the new election. So it's all coming up roses, and everything's coming up Milhouse. And as for the Orville, yeah, it's one of those things that just kind of happens in episodic sci-fi, like the Orville. It's the same thing probably would have happened in Star Trek The Next Generation, which is the show that the Orville is basically a pastiche of, where something that should completely change the world happens, and then it gets wrapped up in kind of a superficial, unstable way at the end. And from that point forward, until they decide to specifically revisit that story, everything is treated like it's just okay, So yeah, the Kalons deciding to wipe out all biological life, starting with Earth, and then trying to do that should be a much bigger deal than it's probably going to be. I haven't seen the most recent episode yet, so I don't know if they deal with it at all in the new episode, or if it's mentioned or what, but yeah, that should be a really, really big deal. It shouldn't be the sort of thing where they just go, oh, whew, that was close. Good thing the Krill came to our rescue. Hopefully we can build a better understanding with the Krill and eventually become strong allies. It's like, yeah, that's great. That's terrific. You should definitely do that. But the Kalons just tried to kill every single biological life form in the galaxy. That's a really, really big deal. So yeah, I don't know. I'm curious to see how the show deals with that. I sense they probably won't try to draw too much attention to it unless they're ready to go back and tell another Kalon story. But yeah, it's a very good point. It's a very good point that you raise it. That should be a big deal. And yes, of course, there is a line between self-defense and just committing outright genocide. I'd wonder if the Kalons would ever be receptive to that, given that lesson would have to be taught either by a biological or by Isaac, who in their eyes has perhaps been corrupted or sort of lured away to the dark side by the biologicals. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what else they do with that in the future. Next question from General Contact Unit Problem Child. How do you feel about the idea of having totally open borders? So far as I can tell, the main argument against open borders is if we, people in first world democracies, have them, too many people from the developing world will flood in to either take advantage of our wealthier programs or take the jobs because working conditions and pay are better in the West. Do you think either fear is based in reality? I don't want to go so far as to say that could never happen, but I don't think it's it wouldn't be a concern of mine. And my position is, as far as borders, I think our immigration system, our immigration philosophy should be oriented around keeping track of who comes in, not keeping people out. I think having an immigration system that is oriented around keeping people out is a bad idea morally, and also is just self-defeating, because I just don't think it's going to work. I just don't think you're never going to be able to keep everybody out that you want to keep out. So instead of trying to keep people out, just say everybody can come in And we're just going to keep track. We're just going to record who comes in. So we'll know you're here, and we're not going to follow you around or, see what else you're doing, but we'll know you're here. And if you break the law, we'll know about it, but don't orient it around fear and around keeping people out. So in that sense, yes, I do think we should have an open border. We should make it much easier to let people come in. And I don't think most of the problems that anti-immigration people say would definitely happen would happen. I'm just not worried about it. So yes, in that sense, I completely support an open border. And beyond that, I think we should specifically be dedicated to making ourselves available and open and accepting of refugees. Like, to me, that's almost a separate issue. Refugees and immigration are sort of thrown together, and they're similar, they're related, but refugees is a particular, like a refugee is someone who is fleeing, who isn't just moving because they want to, or moving because they think they might have a better shot at a good life on the other side of the border. They have to get out of someplace, or they have left someplace and left everything behind, and they don't have anywhere else to go. They're seeking asylum. They're seeking refuge. People like that, especially should be welcomed here. Like, I have no compunction about saying that we should be taking as many refugees into this country as we possibly can. I just think that's a moral imperative for a country like ours that has so much room and so much wealth, that we should not be looking at refugees as a burden. We should be looking at ourselves and our country as a refuge for people in that situation. And the fact that we're not is inexcusable. Next question. From Neo Normie No Longer Knight, who says Eki Eki Zas Pofon Zuthoid. Well, I asked the obvious question. Why the frankly terrible line about Holocaust deniers in your Trek Actually video? As someone who's dated two Jewish people, my first at college, who had only her mother on her mother's side of her family because she was lucky to have had friends who managed to get to neutral Switzerland in 1943 when she was a baby, to have you thinking you're being glib by slotting those poorly chosen words as a barb against people over a shoddy only in name Star Trek series is the equivalent of saying you don't like Jango Fett. Well, you must also disbelieve in the Rwandan genocide. If you're going to make such ridiculous comparisons, maybe you're suffering with horseshoe effect, as plenty of the small-minded on the right compare Sanders to Stalin, suggesting healthcare can lead to purges. I say, make a second video, but mimic those people you claim are Alex Jones of Star Trek, and consider Kurtzman's filmography, as I think running to the difference of a Michael Bay Transformers writer, you're suffering from Obama is a left-winger syndrome, which I witnessed through 2007. Then 2 years later, most people realized their delusion was putting their values onto Obama, not actually looking to his policy. Also, have you ever watched Blake 7? As it is frighteningly close to modern day America in its politics. So I love tacking the Blake 7 question onto the end. So for those of you who don't know what that question is referring to, in my video about Star Trek Discovery conspiracy theories, where it's titled, Is Star Trek Discovery Even Actually Canon? Which was the Trek Actually video, not this week, but last week. I draw a comparison at the end of that video between believing in conspiracy theories about Star Trek Discovery and believing in other conspiracy theories. And among the conspiracy theories I mentioned was believing that the Holocaust didn't happen. And my point was that if you believe in one conspiracy theory, it is possible for you to believe in another one, whether you think that's possible or not. Because if you are able to be persuaded by an argument that is completely free of facts and is actually contradicted by facts in one area, there's no reason to think you wouldn't also be liable to be persuaded by a similar argument in another area, and that other argument might not be about something innocuous like a Star Trek show. It might be about something really, really serious, like whether or not the Holocaust happened, or I think I also said whether or not the moon landings happened, or whether or not immigration is a threat to your country. And I guess I could have also said whether or not vaccines cause autism. There are all kinds of conspiracy theories that can either severely warp your view of the world and of history, or make you susceptible to accept really, really dangerous ideas. Now, I do think it would have been better if I had not mentioned the Holocaust. So I'll apologize for using the Holocaust as an example, because I do see how that is insensitive to people, and how, and even beyond that, I think it's probably just distracting. I could have used a better example to make the same point. So I definitely would take that back, right? I would not say whether or not the Holocaust happened. But I do want to make it clear that I wasn't comparing believing in a Star Trek conspiracy theory to believing in Holocaust denial, or denying the Holocaust would actually be the way someone who speaks English properly would say that. I'm not saying that they're equivalent in any way other than the thought processes and the bad, fallacious arguments that could lead someone to believe that they were true, right? Obviously, Holocaust denial is evil and ahistorical and immoral and inexcusable, and it's a really, really horrible thing that leads to real harm to people's lives, because it's anti-Semitic and it drives hatred and ignorance and fear, and it's just one of the worst things that anybody could possibly believe, right? So there's no comparison between that and believing something about Star Trek that people say is true that is demonstrably untrue. That's not the comparison I'm making at all. And I apologize for inviting people to think that that's what I was doing, because I assure you that's not what I was trying to do. The point was, if you believe in one conspiracy theory, the same bad thinking, the same faulty logic that leads you to believe in that conspiracy theory could lead you to believe in another one. And the next conspiracy theory you could be duped into believing might not be as harmless as Star Trek Discovery isn't canon, right? Ultimately, that's not important. But the thinking that leads you to accept that as true when it is obviously, inarguably not true, could lead you to accept other things as well that are more dangerous. So I apologize for the Holocaust reference. I agree it was in poor taste and it was distracting. But my point was not Discovery deniers equal Holocaust deniers. And if anybody thought that that's what I was saying, I completely apologize for that and assure you that's not what I was trying to say. And no, I've never seen Blake 7. So the answer was just like the question, really serious for most of it, and then something about Blake 7 at the end. No, I've never seen Blake 7. Next question from General Contact Unit Problem Child. Suppose John Roberts, Clarence Thomas, Antonin Scalia, and Samuel Alito had all died in 2009 and were replaced with sane judges by Obama. Would you still take a vote blue no matter who stance if it weren't the case that letting a Republican president win didn't mean possibly allowing right-wingers to take over the Supreme Court for generations? I kind of think I would. Yeah, I can't imagine a scenario, even if Obama had been able to pack the court with Democratic appointees. I still don't think I could ever imagine a scenario where a Republican presidential candidate or a Republican candidate for office in general would be preferable to a Democrat. Obviously, there are many Democrats that are preferable to many other Democrats. Of course, I would prefer to have more progressive Democrats in office. But it's hard to think of a Democrat that I wouldn't vote for over a Republican, because even a shitty Democrat is better than a Republican, you know? So yeah, I think even if the Supreme Court were not as urgent of a matter as it is now, I would still say vote for whoever the Democratic nominee is, because whoever they are has got to be better than the Republicans. Yes, I think I would still have the same attitude. Next question from John Brockman. How long did it take you to find the rug? Did you spend hours agonizing over it and choose the first shitty one that matched your hair color? Did you go to a wig shop in downtown Haderstown? I don't know if that's a typo or if that's intentional. Either way, I love that. Downtown Haderstown, or did you get it from Amazon? Did you kill and skin a varmint for it? Did you kill and skin a Republican? Is it itchy? This is referring to the hairpiece, the hair system, the wig that I wear when I play Michael Worley in the Whirlpool. And yeah, I got it on Amazon, and I got the first one that was in the style that I wanted and that matched my natural hair color. That's the story of how I got the wig. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't go any further than that. I scrolled through Amazon. I said, nah, okay, that one looks good. And I ordered that one. And then it came to my house. That's the story. That's the Michael Worley wig story. Aren't you glad you asked? I'm glad I told the story. It's a good story. Next, from some random geek. Hey, Steve, just a few things. Don't forget to remind your audience to give money to our friends and comrades in need with the links in the description. Links to Lady Columbia's PayPal, to SaphiraJoe@gmail.com. I skipped some. To Lady Columbia's PayPal, Phoenix's GoFundMe campaign. Phoenix will need the money by the middle of May, or else she will be homeless. Joanna via PayPal to SaphiraJoe@gmail.com, who has to beg online in order to live. This is America. And Aaron's PayPal. 2, do you yourself have any questions for anarchists about anarchism? I did ask your audience members for questions, but you didn't ask any questions yourself. 3, I have mentioned this to you already, but you forgot to answer one of my questions in the last Ask Away. The question was, others have a more difficult situation than me, being trans and having one or more of their close relatives that actively vote and support against LGBTQIA+ rights. What would you do in that situation? And in your opinion, what should those people do? Finally, American Johnson of the channel Non-Compete did an interview with a member of the organization Earthstrike of www.earth-strike.com, a grassroots movement demanding immediate climate action from governments and corporations worldwide. Interview here, and there's the link. Would you be willing to use your platform to interview someone from Earthstrike and get the word out about it, as climate change is one of the biggest threats to humanity? I personally think it is possible to reverse climate change. It requires a complete worldwide change to how we do things and what energy sources we all use. And it requires the end of capitalism as well as the end of capitalism as well as the state to achieve that. I have to hope we can reverse it. Otherwise, might as well just give up on everything. And I don't want to do that. Later, Steve, I will be in the live chat. So, yes, please check out the links in the description for our friends who need some help. As I said during Kevin's hangout, and the same is true here. I just haven't thought about it. So no, unfortunately I don't have any questions about anarchism for an anarchist. And as far as the being trans and having one or more close relatives that vote against your interests, what would I do in that situation, and what should they do? I don't think anyone should do anything that would jeopardize their safety. I don't think anyone should do anything if they are in a vulnerable situation. And getting into a worse situation would be very perilous for them. I would not recommend that anybody do that. But if it is possible, if you have the resources, if you have the support, if you have somewhere to go, I would recommend to get away from those people. To get away from people like that, who don't respect you, who don't recognize your identity, who use their political power, even if it's just the power of the vote, to take your rights away from you, to take your human dignity away from you. I think if it's at all possible, you should get away from those people. Nobody should have to live like that, and nobody should have to tolerate people in their lives who disrespect them on a fundamental level and work to pass laws and enforce policies that are harmful and dangerous to you and to people like you. So yeah, if I were in that situation, if I were a person with an LGBTQ plus identity and I had parents who were anti-whatever I was, anti-LGBTQ, anti-gay, anti-trans, whatever, and voted for politicians and voted for policies that were hostile and harmful to me and people like me, if it was at all possible for me to get the fuck out, I would get the fuck out. And personally, just me, I would probably never speak to those fucking people again. Not everybody's like that. See, not everybody wants to do that. Not everybody's capable of doing that emotionally, never mind financially or whatever. Not everybody has it in them to just turn their back on someone and say, I'm just better off without this person in my life. I can do that. Like, I'm willing to do that. If you go too far, right? Not for just a minor offense, but if it's something where you just absolutely fundamentally reject something basic and inoffensive about someone, if you just reject the fact that someone is that someone is trans and deserves respect and deserves equal rights, if I don't have to be around you for some reason, I don't want to be around you. I don't care if you're a family member or not. If I don't have to be around you, I don't want to be around you, because I think that's a really, really shitty attitude, and it harms people. So if at all possible, my advice would be to tell them to fuck off and get away. If that's not possible, or if that would endanger you, then it's more complicated. Then maybe start working toward being able to get away from them. But I hate the fact that anybody would have to put up with that anybody would have to rely for their survival on the tolerance and the charity and the compassion of someone who rejects their humanity at a basic level. That is intolerable, and nobody should be made to tolerate it. As for having someone from Earthstrike on my channel, it's a good idea. I can't commit to it because there are people who I've promised to have live streams with for months that I haven't had time to get on. You know, there are people who have asked me to stream with them, and I really, really want to, and I just don't have time to do it. Or I would have time to do it, but then I forget about it and I let it drop, and then I have to pick it up again and figure out when to do it. So I would not commit to anything right now until I get my backlog cleared, because there are a couple of people who I really, really want to do a stream with and interview and talk about like really important shit that I just haven't done, and I want to do that. That's the answer to that. But yeah, I agree with you. I think climate change could at least be slowed down, if not reversed. And I would love for us to take a serious shot at doing it for obvious reasons. Here's one from John Burnsy. Hey, Steve, 25 years ago, John Candy passed away. I'm unsure if you saw lots of SCTV, but if you did, what about it did you like the most? If not, what role do you remember John Candy from the most? Well, it's interesting. When I was younger, when John Candy was still alive, I did not really have an appreciation for him. I did not think he was that funny. I didn't really get what the big deal was with him. As an adult, my appreciation for him has increased a bit. I'm still not like a massive John Candy fan. I don't have anything against him. Like, I don't think, oh, fuck, John Candy, I'm not watching that. It's not that. I just don't, he hasn't pulled me in and made me think, wow, that guy. So I think I probably know him best from what was the Planes, Trains, and Automobiles? Was that the movie, the John Hughes movie that he made with Steve Martin? Probably that. Or I tell you what, Jason and I watched Home Alone for our Late Seating podcast. I think we both kind of agreed that John Candy was the best part of that fucking movie, because neither one, I do not like Home Alone. I think Home Alone is a terrible movie and not a funny movie, and just a bad movie. But John Candy's in it for a little bit, and he is he is certainly the most tolerable part and the funniest part of that movie. So I'll go with that. I remember John Candy for making parts of Home Alone actually seem not terrible through sheer force of will. Another one from General Contact Unit Problem Child. My fourth favorite sci-fi novel, Consider Phlebas, is about a galaxy-spanning war between two Type 3 civilizations. Because no analogs to the Prime Directive exist in the book's universe, primitive society within the war zone are told about what's going on in the space all around them. I'm not a huge fan of the Prime Directive, but I've always thought this would be a little cruel. I mean, if they can't affect the war, why panic them? I mean, if Earth was in that situation, would you want us to be told, yeah, we're fighting this war all around you. One of us might accidentally blow your sun up or something, but you can't do anything about it. That's a really interesting point that I never considered. That is a facet of the Prime Directive that doesn't really get talked about, which is, yeah, it not only protects pre-warp civilizations from other societies, more advanced societies, meddling in their affairs. Iced tea as usual, for anybody wondering. But it also protects them from anxiety. It keeps them from having to worry about things that are going on in the larger universe that they have no control over. And that's a good point. I don't know if I probably wouldn't want to know either. Or at least if I were, personally, I might want to know, because my attitude is usually, well, I would always want to know. I would always want to know the truth. I would always want to know what the situation is. But if I were a political leader or something, I might say, it's better that we don't know this, or it's better that we don't tell people about this, because there's There's nothing we can do about it. We're totally powerless in the situation. Our fate is in the hands of others, and there's nothing we can do about it. So why worry, everybody? So I think there might be some wisdom in that. Next, these are several questions from Caroline Clark, and Caroline left several comments all in a row, so I just kind of pasted them into one series under her name. So here are Caroline's questions. Steve, I was a fan of Star Trek The Experience during its run at the Hilton Hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada. It was a great way to see paraphernalia pertaining to the shows. They had models of Star Trek starships, costumes, a ride, and the bridge of the Enterprise 1701D. You also got the chance to lose all your money in a Star Trek casino. I was wondering if you ever got to experience the experience. Would you ever consider doing an episode on this Star Trek history? I unfortunately haven't seen many Star Trek Discovery episodes. Your description of the show has me wanting to see the show more and more. On the other hand, I've seen every The Orville episode that has come out. The one thing I can't comprehend is that The Orville doesn't have a transporter of some sort. Do you know if Seth MacFarlane was stymied by CBS in depicting that form of travel? The crew of The Orville has to transport with a shuttlecraft. How lame is that?